Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The wind over Storm's End came howling that night, a voice of the sea and the gods together. The waves struck the cliffs with the fury of beasts, and the rain swept across the high battlements like thrown spears. But inside the great hall of the Baratheons, the fire roared bright and proud, and Lord Robert sat before it with a mug of ale, his laughter rising above the storm. He was young then, barely a man grown, broad of shoulder and taller than most knights. His black hair, thick and wild, framed a face meant for laughter, though already touched by the iron of command. Around him, the men of Storm's End drank and jested, but beneath their mirth was unease, for beyond those walls, the realm trembled. News had ridden hard from the north. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, heir to the Iron Throne, had taken Lyanna Stark, maid of Winterfell, betrothed to Robert himself, and vanished with her. The north called it abduction. The south whispered of love. Yet to Robert, it was treason of the blackest kind. He rose from the firelight then, the shadow of his great height cast long across the stones. "He stole her," he said, voice like thunder. "By the gods, he stole her, and the dragon's fire will pay for it." Maester Cresson, old and bent, dared to speak. "My lord, we must tread with care. The king's wrath burns swiftly, and none may quench it. There are whispers already of madness in Eris's halls." Robert turned toward him, the light glinting in his eyes. "Then let the fire come, Maester. Let it come. I'll not kneel while my bride is in chains." He strode from the hall, leaving behind the laughter, the warmth, and the calm. Outside, the storm broke upon him in full, soaking his cloak and tossing his dark hair. Yet he stood upon the walls, looking to the east where the royal banners flew far beyond the horizon, and he swore his oath to the gods above and the sea below. "I am Robert of House Baratheon," he said into the wind, "and I will have her back. If the realm must bleed for it, then let it bleed." The next day, a raven came to Storm's End bearing black tidings. Lord Rickard Stark and his heir, Brandon, had ridden to King's Landing to demand justice for Lyanna. Instead, the mad king had burned the father alive and strangled the son before the court. Robert read the message once, then again. His hand trembled not from fear, but fury. "The dragon has gone mad," he said. "Now he burns the innocent while his son steals brides. He thinks the realm his to torment." His foster father, Lord Jon Arryn of the Vale, sent word soon after, "Bend the knee, or join me in rebellion." Eddard Stark, brother to Brandon and Lyanna, had fled south to the Eyrie, finding refuge with Jon. The Mad King demanded their heads, but Jon Arryn refused, and the banners of the Vale rose in open defiance. Robert stood at his table that night, staring at the old banner of the crowned stag. "Storm's End was built to withstand any siege," he murmured, "but I was not born to hide behind stone." He looked to his men, loyal retainers, knights sworn to his house for generations. "The Starks are my kin," he said. "Jon Arryn is my father in all but blood, and Lyanna—" His voice caught, just for a heartbeat. "She is my heart. If war is the only road left, then war we shall have." The hall fell silent, save for the crackle of the torches. Then Sir Harbert, grizzled captain of the guard, struck his fist against his breastplate. "For the Storm King!" he shouted, and the cry echoed through the fortress. "For the Storm King!" That night, The banners of House Baratheon were raised high, and their black stag leapt upon fields of gold, fierce and proud. The sound of drums and horns filled the halls as men prepared for war. Robert stood upon the battlements once more, watching the sea churn below. The storm had passed, but thunder still rumbled far away, as if the heavens themselves knew of the blood soon to come. He thought of Lyanna's laughter, of the way her eyes had sparkled like morning frost upon Winterfell's stones. He remembered how she had teased him for boasting, calling him as loud as the sea and twice as proud. "Wait for me, Lyanna," he whispered to the night. "I will come for you. I swear it upon my blood." And so the storm began, not of wind and rain, but of banners and blades, of oaths sworn in fire and broken in blood. When dawn came, ravens took flight from Storm's End, their wings black against the gold of the rising sun. They bore a single message to lords, great and small. Robert Baratheon calls the banners. The realm will rise against the dragon. And across the 7 kingdoms, the old order trembled. The mountains stirred, the rivers ran red in dream, and the air itself seemed heavy with the promise of change. Men spoke of rebellion, of prophecy, of a stag crowned in golden light. But none yet knew how the tale would end, only that the world itself would not be the same when it was done. Thus began the rebellion, and with it, the legend of a man born of storm and fury, who would rise not from noble grace, but from common blood and boundless will. His name was Robert, and his wrath would shake the realm. The morning after Robert called his banners, the castle stirred with the sound of iron and purpose. The smiths' hammers rang in the courtyards, shaping blades and mending armor. The stables filled with the scent of sweat and hay, as horses were readied for the long march north. From the cliffs of Shipbreaker Bay, the fleet of Storm's End waited, sleek galleys bearing the crowned stag upon their sails. Robert moved among his men like a king already born. He clasped their shoulders, spoke their names, and promised gold, glory, and vengeance. "We'll break their chains," he told them, "and tear the dragons from their gilded nests." His laughter was thunder, his words the spark that lit 1,000 hearts aflame. But when night fell and the campfires burned low, the Storm Lord stood alone upon the battlements, looking northward into the dark. He could almost see her, Lyanna, running through the Godswood at Winterfell, her laughter rising among the rustling leaves. For a moment, the great hammer of war that hung at his side seemed lighter, his fury dimmed by longing. "Soon," he whispered, "I will bring you home." The next day, Robert rode from Storm's End with 1,000 men at his back. The roads of the Stormlands lay wet and red-brown after days of rain. Villagers came forth to watch them pass, men, women, children, all silent, all fearful. War had not touched them yet, but already they could feel it in the air, a shadow creeping across the land. At Bitterbridge, they met the first of the Crown's forces. Soldiers loyal to the Targaryens, their armor gleaming like red steel beneath the sun. The king's banners fluttered, the 3-headed dragon of old Valyria, black on crimson. Robert rode forth alone to parley. "Tell your masters," he said, voice carrying over the field, "that the Stormlands are no friend to madness. If they would keep their heads, they'd best keep from my road." The royal captain laughed, and the arrow that followed hissed past Robert's helm. The battle began. What followed was swift and brutal. Robert led from the front, his warhammer rising and falling with the rhythm of a drum. Each stroke shattered shield and bone alike. His men pressed forward behind him, roaring his name. When the fighting ended, The dragon's banners were trampled in the mud, and the field was littered with the broken. Robert stood amid the slain, his breath steaming in the cold air. "Send word to Jon Arryn," he said. "Tell him the first blood of the rebellion has been spilt." They marched north then, through the Reach and into the Vale's mountain roads, where Jon Arryn waited in his eyrie fortress high above the clouds. The old lord greeted Robert and Eddard Stark with open arms, his gray beard trembling as he embraced them both. "The realm burns," Jon said, his eyes grave. "But if we stand together, we may yet quench the fire." Eddard was quiet, solemn as the snows of his homeland. He bore the look of a man hollowed by grief, his father and brother murdered, his sister stolen. Yet when Robert clasped his hand, there was strength between them, unspoken but unbreakable. "For Lyanna," Robert said. "For family," Eddard replied. And so, the banners of the stag, the falcon, and the direwolf flew together for the first time. They rode east to gather strength, seeking the aid of other houses weary of the Mad King's cruelty. The Riverlands were torn by indecision, but Hoster Tully, ever pragmatic, pledged his swords after his daughter's betrothals were secured. Catelyn to Eddard, Lisa to Jon Arryn. In that single bargain, the rebellion found its heart. The months that followed were filled with blood and smoke. Robert fought battle after battle, at Gulltown, at Summerhall, at Ashford. His strength became legend. They said no man could stand before his hammer, that he was the storm given flesh. But war is no song. At the Battle of the Bells in Stony Sept, his fortune faltered. The royal forces under John Connington hunted him through the winding streets, and for the first time, defeat seemed near. Smoke filled the air, and the cries of dying men echoed between the houses. Robert was wounded then, an arrow buried deep in his side. He tore it free with his own hand, bleeding but unbowed. "If this is where I fall," he said, "then let the realm remember who I was." But Eddard Stark would not let him die. With the northern host, he broke through the enemy lines and found Robert within the sept, slumped beside the altar, blood upon his chest. "You came," Robert muttered, half laughing, half weeping. "By the gods, I knew you would." Ned bound his wound and lifted him to his feet. "The storm has not ended yet, my friend." When they rode from Stony Sept, the bells tolled behind them, not for mourning, but for hope. Across the realm, small folk and soldiers alike took up the cry, "Robert lives." That was the turning. Men who had wavered now came to his banner. Lords of the Reach and Riverlands, weary of Dragonfire, began to dream of a freer realm. And in the dark halls of the Red Keep, the Mad King raved. "Burn them all," he whispered to his pyromancers. "Burn them all." Yet still Robert rode. Though his wound ached and his body grew weary, the fire in him burned undimmed. Each night he dreamed of Lyanna, calling his name, her eyes full of fear. He awoke each dawn with the same words on his lips. "Soon, my love, soon." At last, when spring turned to early summer, word came that Prince Rhaegar had gathered the royal host upon the banks of the Trident. There, beneath a sky heavy with storm, the fate of the realm would be decided. Robert stood upon a hill overlooking the river, his armor freshly polished, his hammer gleaming like a shard of the sun. Around him, the banners of half the realm rippled in the wind, the wolf, the falcon, the trout, and the stag. He looked to Eddard beside him and smiled, though his eyes were hard. "It ends today." "Aye," Ned said, "one way or another." Robert turned to his men, thousands strong, their faces grim but fierce. "We ride for freedom," he bellowed, for vengeance, and for those the dragon burned, for the north, for the Vale, for the Riverlands, for the Stormlands. His voice carried over the ranks like thunder. And for Lyanna Stark. A great cheer rose, and the storm broke in their hearts. Thus they rode to the Trident, where the river would soon run red, and the crown of dragons would fall. The morning of the battle dawned gray and still. Mist clung to the reeds and the stones of the riverbanks, and the sound of the water moving through the Trident was like the breath of something vast and ancient. Crows circled above the plain, black against a pale sky. Men stirred in their camps, tightening armor straps, whispering prayers to old gods and new. Robert Baratheon stood upon the rise above his host, silent for once. His great warhammer hung at his side, the head of it dark with old blood and freshly polished for new. The river wind caught his black hair, and his cloak of gold and sable streamed behind him like a banner. He had not slept, though dawn found him calm, too calm, as if the storm within had gone quiet, waiting for the thunder to break. Across the waters, the royal host gathered like a tide of red and black. Thousands of men bore the sigil of the dragon, their shields polished, their armor bright as flame. In their midst, beneath a banner that rippled like fire, waited Rhaegar Targaryen. His armor was polished steel, studded with black rubies that shone like drops of blood. The prince sat his pale horse in silence, a far cry from the madness of his father. His face was calm, sorrowful even, as if he too mourned what must come. "Do you see him, Ned?" Robert asked softly, his eyes never leaving the Silver Prince. "I see him," Eddard replied, his own hand resting on the hilt of ice. "Are you ready?" Robert's mouth curved into a grim smile. "I was born ready for this day." The horns blew, long and deep. The ground trembled beneath 1,000 hooves. The battle of the Trident had begun. Robert led his vanguard himself, the crowned stag upon his banner flying before him. They thundered down the slope and into the shallows of the river, the cold spray striking their faces. The first clash was like the breaking of mountains. Lances shattered, swords rang, and men were swept away by the flood or the press of battle. Robert's hammer rose and fell, crushing helms, breaking shields, and driving fear into the hearts of his foes. He was tireless, roaring commands, rallying his men wherever the line faltered. Around him the air was thick with the smell of blood and steel, and the cries of the dying filled the riverbanks. Across the field, Rhaegar fought as if born for battle. His sword gleamed silver in the morning light, his every movement graceful and sure. Men fell before him as he cut through Robert's bannermen, seeking the rebel lord himself. At last, they met in the heart of the river. The water reached their knees, cold and red as it churned between them. The noise of the battle faded, and for a heartbeat the world seemed to hold its breath. "Rhaegar!" Robert's voice rang out like thunder. "You took from me what was mine." Rhaegar's eyes were sad. "She loved me," he said. "You could never understand." Robert's fury flared. "Then you die for it." He spurred his horse forward, swinging his hammer in a great arc. Rhaegar's sword met it with a sound like a crack of lightning. Steel screamed against steel. Again and again they struck, hammer and blade, sun and storm. Around them, men watched in awe, the clash of their lords more terrible than any dragon's wrath. A blow from Rhaegar cut a gash across Robert's arm, but the Stag Lord did not falter. His hammer caught the prince's shield, shattering it to splinters. Rhaegar reeled, then struck back, his blade grazing Robert's side. Blood mingled with the river, darkening the waters. And then, as the sun broke through the clouds, Robert's hammer came down one final time. It struck Rhaegar square in the chest, crushing the rubies from his armor. They burst into the river like drops of crimson fire, scattering across the current. Rhaegar fell, his sword slipping from his grasp, and the river carried him away. For a moment, all was silent. Then a great cry rose from the rebel host. "The dragon is dead!" The sound carried over the field, over the corpses and the broken spears, echoing into the hills beyond. The royal host wavered, then broke. Some fled, others fell where they stood, their cause undone with the fall of their prince. Robert stood amidst the carnage, his breath ragged, his armor dented and red. Eddard came to him, eyes wide with what they had done. "It is over," Ned said. Robert looked to the river, where the rubies still floated like blood upon the water. "No," he murmured. "It has only begun." In the days that followed, the rebellion surged like wildfire through the realm. News of Rhaegar's death spread faster than the wind. Lords who had once bent the knee to the Iron Throne now sent their banners to Robert's cause. The Storm Lord had become a symbol, a hero born of common blood, who had slain a dragon and freed the realm from madness. Yet victory came shadowed by sorrow. King's Landing fell soon after, but not by Robert's hand. Lord Tywin Lannister, who had waited out the war, rode to the city with his armies and offered fealty to the new king. Too late, yet too soon. The gates were opened and his men poured in. By the time Eddard Stark entered the capital, the city reeked of smoke and death. The bodies of Rhaegar's wife and children lay upon the cold stones of the Red Keep, slain in the sack. Eddard had looked upon them with horror, and his heart had hardened against all talk of glory. When Robert came, limping but victorious, he found Ned waiting in the throne room. The Iron Throne loomed before them, twisted, black, cruel. "It's done," Robert said. "The dragons are dead." "They were children," Ned replied coldly. Robert's jaw tightened. "They were dragons all the same. The realm is free now. It was the price that had to be paid." The friendship between them, once strong as steel, bent under the weight of that day. But Robert was crowned all the same. The lords of the realm bent the knee, one by one, before the man who had slain Rhaegar on the trident. In the great sept, as the crown of gold was set upon his dark hair, Robert Baratheon rose, not as rebel or lord, but as king. The cheers of the realm filled the hall, and the sound of them echoed across the 7 kingdoms. Yet amid the triumph, a shadow lingered. Lyanna was gone, lost to him forever. And though he sat upon the throne of kings, Robert knew that no crown, no victory, could fill the hollow that her absence had left within his heart. The storm had broken, but the peace it left behind was only silence before another storm to come. The Iron Throne stood in shadow, vast and cruel, its edges glinting in the light of the torches that guttered along the walls. Each blade forged into its frame seemed to whisper of the blood it had taken to build it, of men burned, of kings slain, of oaths broken. Upon that throne sat Robert Baratheon, the new crowned king of Westeros, the hammer of rebellion, the storm made flesh. The hall was crowded with lords and knights, their silks and armor gleaming, their faces bright with false smiles. All had come to see the end of dragons and the rise of a new age. The banners of House Targaryen had been torn down, their red and black replaced with the golden stag. Trumpets blared, and the High Septon's voice echoed beneath the high vaults, proclaiming the dawn of peace. Robert sat straight and still, yet there was no joy in his eyes. His right hand rested upon the arm of the throne, where sharp steel bit against his skin. Blood welled in tiny beads, and he thought, So this is what it means to rule. When the ceremony was done, and the great doors closed upon the echoing cheers, Eddard Stark came to him in the silence that followed. The Northern Lord's face was grave, his eyes shadowed with a sorrow that the crown could not lighten. "You should rest," Ned said. "The realm is yours, but you must live to keep it." Robert laughed, though the sound was hollow. "Rest? The gods mock us, Ned. I have sat upon this throne a single day, and already I feel the weight of it." He leaned forward, the torchlight playing across his scarred face. "Tell me, my friend, do I look like a king?" Ned looked at him for a long moment. "You look like a man who fought too long and lost too much." The words stung, for they were true. Lyanna's name hung unspoken between them, a ghost neither dared to summon. That night, Robert walked the silent corridors of the Red Keep alone. The castle that had once been the heart of a dynasty felt to him more like a tomb. The great doors of the throne room loomed behind him, and ahead, the long hallway stretched into shadow. He came at last to the crypt where Rhaegar's wife and children had been laid to rest. The candles burned low, their flames flickering in the still air. Robert looked down upon the marble likeness of the prince he had slain, the silver hair, the calm, noble features. "You were no monster," he murmured, "only a fool like me." He turned away before the ghosts could answer. At dawn, the lords of Westeros gathered again. The task of rebuilding the realm had begun. The Targaryen loyalists who survived were hunted or forced into exile. The small council was remade. Jon Arryn as Hand of the King, Stannis Baratheon given Dragonstone, and Renly, the youngest, made Lord of Storm's End. But even as the new order settled upon the land, a whisper of unease moved through the court. The Lannisters, who had come late to the war, had gained more than any. Tywin Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, stood at Robert's right hand, his golden lion glinting in the sun, and beside him, his daughter Cersei, beautiful, proud and cold as a winter's blade. When Jon Arryn first spoke of the marriage, Robert had said nothing. The alliance made sense. The realm needed peace, and peace needed heirs. Yet deep within him, a voice whispered of betrayal. He did not love this woman. He would never love her. His heart still belonged to Lyanna Stark, who lay buried beneath the cold stones of Winterfell. But kings do not marry for love. And so the wedding was held beneath skies heavy with summer heat. Minstrels sang of unity and renewal, of dragons slain and kingdoms reborn. Robert drank deeply, laughed loudly, and wore the crown as if it weighed nothing at all. But that night, when the feast was done and the candles guttered low, he stood once more upon the balcony overlooking the Blackwater rush. The wind carried the scent of ash and salt. Below, the city murmured with life, merchants shouting, children crying, dogs barking in the alleys. The same city that had burned not long ago, the same city that would burn again. He closed his eyes, and for a moment he heard Lyanna's voice upon the wind. "You were never meant for peace, Robert," she seemed to whisper. "You are the storm." He opened his eyes, and the vision was gone. In the months that followed, the 7 kingdoms bent beneath the new king's rule. The lords of the realm swore fealty, some out of loyalty, others out of fear. Yet for all the pomp and ceremony, unrest lingered in the shadows. Bandits roamed the countryside, war-torn villages starved, and old loyalties whispered treason. Robert spent his days in council and his nights in wine. The weight of kingship sat poorly upon him, and often his laughter was forced, his anger swift. Jon Arryn counseled patience and justice. Stannis spoke of duty and law. but Robert would only shake his head and reach for another cup. "I won the realm with this hammer," he would say, striking the table. "Perhaps I should have ruled with it too." Eddard returned north to Winterfell, weary of court. Their parting was heavy. "If ever you have need of me," Ned said, "you need only send word." Robert clasped his shoulder. "You are my brother still. The realm may change, but that never will." As Ned rode away, Robert watched until he was gone, the last true friend he had left. Years passed, and the storm that had shaken the world settled into uneasy calm. The golden stag flew over the castles of Westeros, yet beneath its proud banner, corruption grew like weeds in a forgotten garden. The king's coffers dwindled, his strength faded. His days became a blur of hunts, feasts, and old songs sung for glory long dead. But even as his power waned, stories of the rebellion spread like embers on the wind. In the taverns and halls of the realm, bards sang of the mighty warrior who had struck down the dragon prince in the river's heart. Children played at war with sticks, shouting, "Robert the Storm King." And in the far north, beneath the cold stones of Winterfell, a young boy would sometimes ask of the lady whose tomb lay in shadow. "Who was she?" he would say, and the answer, whispered softly by the wind through the crypt, was always the same. She was the love of a king and the loss of a kingdom. So the years turned, and the legend of Robert Baratheon grew, told in song and story, remembered in triumph and in tragedy. He had been the hammer that broke the dragon, the rebel who rose from common blood to rule a realm. Yet his crown, forged in fire and grief, weighed heavier than any he had borne before. For though he had won the throne, the cost had been everything he held dear. And somewhere, beyond the reach of banners and crowns, the gods watched and whispered of storms yet to come. The years that followed the rebellion passed like the turning of slow wheels in mud, heavy, grinding, and full of unseen cracks. Though the songs still praised King Robert Baratheon, though the realm named him the breaker of dragons and the bringer of peace, the truth was far less bright. The Iron Throne, cold and cruel, had no heart for the man who sat upon it. It was a seat of ghosts, Rhaegar's laughter in the wind, Lyanna's voice whispering through the stone corridors, the cries of those burned by the Mad King's command. Each morning, Robert donned the mantle of rule as one might bear a chain. In the great hall of the Red Keep, courtiers gathered daily to bow and flatter, to whisper and plot. Gold cloaks stood guard in gleaming ranks, and the scent of incense masked the rot of power. Robert sat upon the throne, his crown slightly askew, his gaze distant as his counsel droned on. "My king," Lord Petyr Baelish said one morning, his voice smooth as oil. "The treasury runs thin. The cost of the new ships and the harvest relief." "Bah!" Robert thundered, waving his hand. "I did not fight a war to count coins like some peddler." Jon Arryn, his hand, sighed softly beside him. "And yet, your grace, a realm is not ruled by steel alone. The coffers must be tended, or they will soon run dry." Robert's scowl deepened, but he said no more. He rose abruptly from the throne, his heavy boots striking the marble. "Enough. The council bores me. I'll hear no more talk of gold today." The lords watched as he strode from the hall, his cloak of black and gold swirling behind him. The doors closed, and whispers followed in his wake. That night, in his chambers, Robert poured himself wine and stared into the fire. His warhammer hung upon the wall, dull with dust. It seemed a relic from another life. He thought of Storm's End, the salt air, the crash of the sea, the laughter of his youth. He thought of Ned and Winterfell, where snow fell clean upon the stones, and he thought of Lyanna, always Lyanna. Cersei entered then, her beauty sharp as glass. Her green eyes flickered in the firelight, cold and distant. "You drink too much," she said. He did not look at her. "I rule too much." "Do you?" Her voice carried a mocking lilt. "You sit the throne, yes, but the realm is ruled by others. You have become what you always despised, a man of court." He turned to her, anger rising. "Mind your tongue, woman." Her lips curved into a thin smile. "A king who must remind others he is king is no true ruler at all." For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them, sharp as a drawn blade. Then Robert turned away. "Leave me," he said, his voice low. "Before I remember, I am still strong enough to make you." Her gown rustled as she turned, and her laughter followed her out, a cold, brittle sound that lingered after the door had closed. The next morning, the hunt was called. Robert had always found his freedom among the trees, away from the suffocating walls of the Red Keep. His laughter rang truer in the wild, his strength renewed beneath open skies. The royal party rode north through the Kingswood, banners snapping in the wind. Hounds bayed, horns blared, and for a time the king was the man he had once been, wild, free, fearless. But when the stag broke from the brush, his heart leapt for another reason. The beast was mighty, antlers wide as a man's outstretched arms, its hide dark as shadow. It stood proud and still, as if it knew who hunted it. Robert lowered his spear, his grin fierce. "A stag for the stag," he said. The chase was long, the ground treacherous. Branches tore at cloaks, hooves struck roots hidden beneath the leaves. Yet Robert rode hard, his laughter carrying through the wood. When at last he caught sight of the beast again, his breath came fast and wild. The stag turned at bay beside a stream, its eyes bright with defiance. Robert's spear flashed in the sunlight and missed. The creature bounded away into the deeper forest, vanishing like a dream. Robert reined in, panting. "Gods take it," he muttered. "I've grown slow." Sir Barristan Selmy rode up beside him, his white cloak splashed with mud. "You are no longer 20, Your Grace." Robert grinned through his sweat. "Aye, but my heart still is." That night they camped by the river. The fire crackled, and the smell of roasting meat filled the air. Men laughed and told tales of the war, of the Trident, of Summerhall, of the rebellion's glories. But when the laughter faded, Barristan spoke quietly. "Do you ever think of those we left behind, Your Grace? Of those who fell so that we might sit here tonight?" Robert stared into the fire. "Every day." He lifted his cup and drank deeply. "But thinking will not bring them back, Sir Barristan. The dead belong to the gods. The living must endure." In the capital, word came of unrest in the riverlands, of bandits and broken men. Jon Arryn, ever patient, counseled that the king return to duty. Robert promised to ride back soon, but the promise meant little. He lingered in the woods for many days, hunting and drinking, trying to quiet the restlessness that gnawed at his soul. At last, when the horns of the hunt sounded one dawn, he rose wearily from his tent. The mist lay thick upon the forest floor. He mounted his horse, took his spear once more, and followed the sound of hounds into the fog. They found the stag again that day. It stood upon a ridge, proud and silent, its breath clouding in the chill air. Robert smiled. "There you are." He hurled his spear, and the world seemed to slow. The shaft flew true, striking deep into the beast's side. The stag staggered, then fell. Robert dismounted, his steps heavy as he approached the fallen creature. He knelt beside it, one hand upon its dark hide. Its great eyes met his for an instant, filled with wild defiance to the end. "You were a king of the wood," he said softly, "and now you fall to a man who no longer remembers what that means." The stag's final breath shuddered through the air. Robert stood, silent, the forest around him hushed. When his men found him there, he gave no command, no jest. He simply turned and walked away, the crown upon his head seeming heavier than ever. That night, in the quiet of his tent, Robert dreamed. He saw Lyanna again, her hair spread upon a bed of blood, her eyes full of sorrow. She reached for him, whispering words he could not hear. When he awoke, dawn was breaking, and the world was gray once more. The storm within him was not gone. It had only grown quieter, waiting for its time to break again. And far to the north, beyond Winterfell's walls, the wind carried a whisper down from the wall, cold, ancient, and full of warning. The age of peace that Robert's hammer had won was only the calm before another storm. The years rolled onward like a slow tide, washing the color from Robert Baratheon's reign. The songs of his youth, once loud and bright, were sung less often now. The hammer that had shattered a dynasty hung forgotten in the armory, its iron head dulled with dust. In the Red Keep, the days passed beneath a haze of wine, council meetings, and quarrels. The courtiers bowed as deeply as ever, but behind their smiles, Robert felt only shadows. He ruled a kingdom at peace, yet he could not remember what peace was meant to feel like. The dawn light poured through the high windows of the small council chamber one morning as Robert entered, his cloak askew, his eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. Around the long table sat his lords and counselors, Jon Arryn, ever patient, Stannis, grim as stone, Renly, bright and handsome, and others who murmured in soft tones of trade and taxes. Robert slumped into his chair and waved a dismissive hand. "Talk, then. Let's have done with it." Varys the eunuch, clad in silk and perfume, smiled his secret smile. "Reports from the east, your grace. New merchants bring tales of dragon eggs and fire priests." Robert snorted. "Let them play with old bones. I've killed my share of dragons." Littlefinger leaned forward, his eyes gleaming, "And emptied the treasury doing so. The crown owes more gold than any king before you, your grace." Robert fixed him with a dark look. "Then tax the lords who grow fat on my peace, or better yet, make them fight each other for it." "I care not." Jon Arryn raised a calming hand. "You must care, Robert. The realm you bled for will crumble if the lords lose faith." Robert's reply was sharp. "I won the realm, Jon. If they wish to take it from me, they can try." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the hall. The only sound was the rustle of parchment, the crackle of torches. Then Robert sighed and leaned back. "I grow tired of this talk. I would rather hear of hunts and feasts than coin and parchment." Renly smiled, ever the peacemaker. "Then you must come south with me, brother. The stags of the Stormlands still remember your spear." Robert's laughter returned, brief but real. "Aye, perhaps I will. The gods made me for hunting, not counting." But when the meeting ended, Jon Arryn stayed behind. The old hand stood by the window, gazing out upon the city. "You cannot run forever, Robert," he said quietly. "The throne does not forgive neglect." Robert looked at him, the last true friend he had left. "You were the father I never had, Jon. Tell me, what have I become?" "A king," Jon said, "but not the one you wished to be." That night, Robert dined with his queen. The hall glittered with candlelight, the table heavy with silver dishes and roasted meats. Yet the air was cold between them. Cersei Lannister wore emeralds that caught the light like forest fire. Her beauty had not faded, though her smile had grown harder. She watched her husband drink, her gaze distant and calculating. "You might have been great," she said suddenly, her voice soft but sharp. Robert turned to her, wine glistening on his beard. "I was great. Once." "You were strong," she corrected, "but strength is not greatness. You might have been a true king, Robert, had you not spent your life mourning ghosts." He slammed his cup down, wine spilling across the table. "You dare speak to me of ghosts? You, whose father opened the gates of King's Landing for slaughter?" Cersei's eyes flashed. "And who gave your throne to you?" Robert rose, his anger a storm breaking loose. And I took it. Do not forget that, woman. No Lannister won me this crown. I won it myself." Their words clashed like swords, but when the rage passed, silence fell heavy between them. He sank back into his chair, exhausted. She stood and left without a word, her green eyes cold as polished jade. He sat long after she had gone, staring into the dying embers. "Lyanna," he thought, "if you had lived, perhaps I would have been the man I dreamed of." Spring came to King's Landing, soft and fragrant, but with the flowers came whispers of trouble in the Vale, of strange letters and darker secrets. One morning, a raven came to the Red Keep bearing grim news. Jon Arryn was dead. Robert read the words twice before they sank in. His hands trembled as he crushed the parchment. "No," he muttered, "not Jon." The loss struck him harder than he expected. It was as if the last pillar of his youth had fallen away. He ordered the bells rung for a day and a night. The city mourned, though most did not understand why the king's grief was so deep. When the sound faded, Robert sat alone in the throne room, the empty echo of the bells haunting him still. Eddard Stark's name came to him then. Ned, his brother in all but blood, the one man he still trusted. "Send for him," Robert said. "I would have him by my side once more." The ravens flew north that night, bearing the king's summons to Winterfell. Weeks later, as he awaited Ned's coming, Robert found himself wandering the Godswood within the Red Keep, an echo of the one at Storm's End, though smaller and more carefully tended. The heart tree there was no weirwood, but an old oak, gnarled and ancient. He sat beneath its branches, the scent of leaves and earth filling the air. The city's noise was distant here. For a time, he could almost forget the crown upon his head. He remembered the boy he had been, the laughter, the fights, the dreams. He remembered the hammer's weight, the roar of battle, the rush of victory, and he wondered, when it had all begun to slip away, "You are not the man I fought beside," he whispered to the still air. "What have you become?" The wind rustled the branches, and for an instant, it seemed to answer. He stayed there until the stars emerged, bright and cold above the city. When word came at last that Lord Eddard Stark was riding south, Robert felt a strange stirring in his chest, a flicker of the old fire, of friendship and hope long dimmed. Perhaps, he thought, with Ned beside him again, he might yet remember what it meant to be Robert Baratheon, the Stormborn, the rebel of common blood who had defied kings and fate alike. And somewhere, deep within him, the storm began to stir again. The wind off the narrow sea carried the scent of salt and memory as the royal procession wound northward through the riverlands. King Robert rode at its head, armor gleaming faintly beneath his heavy cloak, his once black hair streaked with gray. He had not left the capital in many years, and the air of the open road filled him with a strange mixture of exhilaration and melancholy. Behind him trailed a glittering host, lords, knights, and courtiers draped in silk and steel. Gold cloaks rode beside crimson lions. Lannister banners fluttered alongside the crowned stag. The king's laughter rose often above the clatter of hooves, but it was a laughter forced, like the echo of an old song sung too many times. Cersei rode beside him for the first days, her posture regal, her face a mask carved from pride. At her side came her brothers, Jaime, the Kingslayer, golden and smiling, and Tyrion, small and sharp-eyed, his wit cutting as his brother's sword. The king bore their company with uneven humor. One night, as the sun set crimson over the hills, Robert drank deep and muttered, "The gods mock me, sending me on a journey with lions for company." Jaime only smiled, his eyes bright in the firelight. "You seem to enjoy the hunt, Your Grace." "Aye," Robert growled, "but the hunt I ride for lies in the north, not the woods." He looked toward the darkening sky. "I go to see a friend, Ser Jaime, a true friend, not one who smiles with daggers in his heart." Cersei's gaze was cold, but she said nothing. The fire popped, sparks rising like lost stars into the night. Days later, the north's first chill touched the wind. The lands grew rougher, the villages sparser, the trees taller and older. The songs of the courtiers faded into silence, replaced by the creak of saddles and the distant cry of crows. Robert found solace in the stillness. He rode ahead often, away from the glittering column, to feel the wind in his face and the ache of the road in his bones. The land here was honest, hard and bare, untouched by the rod of court. When at last the towers of Winterfell rose before him, stark against the gray sky, he felt something stir within him, a flicker of warmth, of memory. "It has not changed," he murmured. The gates opened wide, and there stood Eddard Stark, tall and solemn, his cloak of gray fur billowing in the wind. Time had not softened him. His face was leaner now, marked by loss, but his eyes held the same steady light Robert remembered from their youth. "Your Grace," Ned said, bowing his head. Robert laughed and dismounted, pulling the other man into a fierce embrace. "Your Grace? Gods, Ned, spare me that nonsense. I've come too far to hear it." For a moment, the years fell away. They were two young men again, brothers in arms, bound by oaths and blood. Yet when they parted, Robert saw the difference between them. Ned wore the North's silence like armor. Robert carried his crown like a wound. "Come," Ned said. "Winterfell welcomes its king." That night, the great hall was alive with light and song. The fires roared high, the ale flowed freely, and for the first time in years, Robert felt almost at peace. He sat at the high table beside Ned, eating, laughing, and telling tales of old battles. "Do you remember the trident?" Robert bellowed, slamming his cup upon the table. "When Rhaegar thought to sing his way to victory?" Ned smiled faintly. "I remember. You nearly drowned in your own glory that day." Robert's laughter filled the hall. "Aye, and I'd drown again if it meant seeing that dragon fall." But even as he laughed, he saw shadows in Ned's eyes, shadows of loss, of something left unsaid. When the feast ended, they walked together through the godswood, where the heart tree stood white and silent. The faces carved in its bark watched them with sightless eyes. Robert sighed, his breath misting in the cold. "I've missed this place, the smell of pine, the sound of wind through leaves. King's Landing stinks of lies and gold." Ned said nothing for a time, then quietly, "Why have you come, Robert? Truly?" Robert looked toward the sky, where the stars gleamed cold and far. "Because I am a lonely man, Ned. Because every day I sit that damned throne, and I see the ghosts of what we were. I lost everything that mattered, and now Jon is gone too." Ned's brow furrowed. "Jon Arryn?" Robert nodded. "Poison, they say. Gods help me, I need you, Ned. I need you to be my hand." The words hung in the air, heavy as stone. Ned turned toward the weirwood, his face pale in the moonlight. "You ask much, Robert. I ask what no other man can give me, honesty." Silence stretched between them. At last, Ned bowed his head. "If it is my duty, I will come." Robert clapped a hand upon his shoulder. "It is more than duty. It is friendship, and if the gods are kind, it will save us both." In the days that followed, the king lingered in Winterfell. He rode through the forests, hunted beneath the wide sky, and watched the Stark children at their play. He found himself drawn to the quiet strength of the place, the smell of snow, the sound of the blacksmith's hammer, the laughter that echoed faintly from the courtyards. One morning, as the sun rose over the battlements, he stood beside the tombs in the crypts below the castle. Torches flickered in their sconces, casting long shadows over the stone effigies of Stark lords long dead. Before one statue lay a small garland of winter roses, white and fragile. Robert knelt beside it. "Lyanna," he whispered, "do you still haunt this place?" His hand brushed the cold stone, and his voice broke. "I tried, my love. I tried to make a realm worth dying for. But I am no king. Only a fool who thought he could wrest peace from war." The silence answered him. When he returned to the surface, the sun was bright and merciless. Cersei awaited him, her face unreadable. "You spend too much time with ghosts," she said. He met her gaze. "Better ghosts than the living who plot behind smiles." Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more. That evening, as the king's host prepared to depart, Robert stood upon the battlements beside Ned one last time. The wind was cold, carrying the scent of pine and snow. "When next we meet," Robert said, "it will be in King's Landing. Bring your honor with you, my friend. The court has forgotten what that word means." Ned inclined his head. "And may you find your strength again, your grace. You'll need it." Robert laughed softly, though there was little mirth in it. "Strength I have. What I lack are the years." He mounted his horse, the great black destrier stamping restlessly. As he turned toward the southern road, he looked back once more at Winterfell, the home he might have loved, the peace he might have chosen. Then he spurred his horse forward, the golden stag upon his banner snapping in the wind. And so, the king rode south, toward the capital that awaited him, toward the shadows gathering unseen. The road stretched long and gray beneath the setting sun, and though he did not know it, Robert Baratheon was riding not only toward his fate, but toward the end of his song. The royal procession wound southward once more, leaving the chill of the north behind. The wind carried with it the scent of pine and snow, until even that faded, replaced by the heavy warmth of the riverlands and the hum of insects beneath the sun. The banners of the stag and the lion flapped side by side in the spring breeze, bright and gaudy against a sky of clear blue. Robert Baratheon rode at the head of his company, yet his thoughts lingered far behind. In the silence of his heart, he could still see Winterfell's gray walls fading into mist, and the solemn face of Eddard Stark, steadfast as the land itself. A weight pressed upon him, the old ache of friendship and the heavy crown he could never seem to cast off. Cersei rode behind him, her golden hair catching the light, her beauty as cold and distant as the moon. She had spoken little since their departure. Robert did not mind her silence. It spared him her barbed tongue. The court whispered and laughed in her shadow, the Lannister cousins, the knights and flatterers, the perfumed hands that clutched at royal favor. Robert ignored them all. He rode hard, faster than his escort liked, as if by sheer will he might outrun the burdens that followed him. When dusk fell and they camped beside the King's Road, the king sat alone beside the fire, a flagon of wine in his hand. His warhammer lay nearby, polished and gleaming, the weight of old memory. He turned it slowly in the firelight, watching the reflection of the flames upon its head. I was a warrior once, he thought bitterly. A man who fought for love, for honor, for vengeance. What am I now but a drunkard wearing a crown? The stars shimmered overhead. He could almost hear Lyanna's voice in the rustle of the leaves, a whisper too faint to catch, too cruel to forget. Jaime Lannister approached the fire then, his golden armor catching the starlight. "A fine night, Your Grace," he said lightly. "If we ride well tomorrow, we'll reach the Trident by dusk." Robert's gaze sharpened. The Trident. He laughed, though the sound was low and harsh. I remember that river. I made my kingdom there, and lost it, perhaps, the same day." Jaime tilted his head, curious. Few men call victory loss. Then few men understand what it costs. Robert gestured with the flagon. "Tell me, Kingslayer, when you killed Aerys, did you feel triumph?" Jaime's expression flickered, a shadow crossing his golden face. "I felt relief." "Relief," Robert echoed, taking a long swallow of wine. "Aye, perhaps that's the truest word for kingship." He waved the younger man away then, tired of ghosts. Jaime bowed with a faint smile and withdrew, leaving the king alone with the night. The next day brought heat and dust. The company passed through towns rebuilt from the scars of rebellion, fields green again, though haunted by memories of fire. Peasants came to the roadside to gape at their king, bowing low as he passed. Robert raised a hand now and then, but his eyes were distant, seeing not the living, but the dead. By the time the sun dipped low, they reached the crossing of the Trident. The river ran slow and golden beneath the twilight, its surface calm, hiding all memory of blood. Robert reined in his horse upon the bank and sat in silence. The others halted behind him, uncertain. None dared speak. Here it had happened, where hammer had met sword, where Rhaegar Targaryen had fallen, and rubies had scattered like drops of fire upon the water. The king dismounted slowly and walked to the river's edge. He knelt, dipping his hand into the cool current. "The same water," he murmured, "always flowing, never still." Cersei came to stand beside him, her gown of green silk rustling softly. "Is this where you killed him?" she asked. Robert nodded without looking up. "Aye, he was a fine man. Foolish, but fine. The realm loved him once. And you hated him." Robert's jaw tightened. "I hated what he took from me. But hate fades. The past does not." Cersei's voice was quiet, edged with disdain. "Perhaps you would have loved him, had you been born a woman." Robert turned then, his face darkening. "Mind your tongue." She met his gaze unflinching. "I have learned to speak truth, Your Grace, since my husband will not hear it otherwise." He stared at her for a long moment, then laughed, a hollow sound. "You think truth is what you speak? No, woman. You only speak what you wish were true." He stood and walked away, leaving her to the whisper of the river. That night, the camp settled near the crossing. The men sang softly by the fires, but their songs were weary things, echoes of better days. Robert sat apart, staring into the dark. Ser Barristan Selmy joined him quietly. "Your Grace," the old knight said, "it is not good to dwell upon ghosts. The realm needs a living king." Robert's eyes did not move from the flames. A living king, aye, but for how long? The realm devours its rulers. The dragons proved that. The stags will follow. Barristan bowed his head. Then let us hope the gods are merciful. Robert smiled grimly. Mercy? I have seen none from them. The gods make men kings only to break them. He lifted his cup, drinking deep. Yet still, I'll live as I please. I'll hunt. I'll drink. I'll laugh. And I'll damn the crown if it tries to stop me. The fire crackled, sparks flying upward like fleeting stars. Barristan said no more. By dawn they rode again, crossing the river and leaving the ghosts behind. The days grew longer as they neared the Crown Lands, the air thick with the scent of summer grass and blooming flowers. But peace lay only on the surface. Beneath, the realm shifted, whispers of plots, of debts unpaid, of wolves and lions both watching from the shadows. Robert felt it, though he could not name it. A heaviness, as though the world itself held its breath. When at last the towers of King's Landing rose upon the horizon, their red stone bright beneath the sun, he sighed. The city sprawled vast and filthy below, teeming with noise and smoke. The pit returns to claim its king, he muttered. Cersei, riding beside him now, smiled faintly. You should be glad, my lord. The Game of Thrones awaits you. He looked at her, weary but unflinching. Aye, and one day it will bury us both. The golden gates opened before them. Trumpets blared, and the crowd roared as their king returned. Yet in Robert's heart, there was no triumph, only the dull ache of a man who had seen too much of victory. As he passed beneath the archway, the light dimmed, and the shadow of the Red Keep swallowed him whole. The storm had not ended. It had merely changed its shape. The bells of the Great Sept tolled as King Robert Baratheon returned to King's Landing, their heavy clang echoing across the roofs of the city like the call of some ancient beast awakening from slumber. From the harbor to the hill, the crowds gathered to see their king, cheering and waving as though the years of his reign had been kind. Children shouted, vendors cried their wares, and the smell of salt, smoke, and spiced wine filled the air. Robert rode through them in silence, his expression unreadable. The streets he had once entered as a conqueror now seemed narrower, darker. The cheers of the small folk rang hollow in his ears. Their cries of "Long live the king" sounded less like praise and more like a plea. At his side rode Queen Cersei, radiant in gold and emerald, her smile practiced, her eyes distant. Behind them came the royal train, lords and ladies, guards and servants, knights whose banners gleamed in the sun. Jaime Lannister, bright as a coin freshly minted, rode with the King's Guard at the fore. His gaze flicked toward the king now and again, unreadable as glass. The Red Keep loomed ahead, its towers rising from the cliff like claws of red stone. To Robert, it looked not like a palace, but a prison. When the gates closed behind him and the sound of the city faded, he felt as though the air itself had grown heavier. Home at last, he muttered, though the word tasted of iron. That evening, the council gathered. The chamber was warm and close, filled with the scent of parchment and wax. Around the long table sat the men who ruled in the king's name. Varys, the spider, Petyr Baelish, sly and smiling, Renly, young and quick-tongued, and Lord Stannis, stern as stone, his face carved with disapproval. Robert entered with heavy steps, his boots striking against the marble. "Well," he said, dropping into his chair, "what trouble have you for me today?" "None, we hope," said Varys, his voice smooth as silk. "The realm rejoices at your grace's safe return." "Rejoices, does it?" Robert poured himself wine. They'd rejoice more if I cut taxes and drowned the lords who bleed them dry." Baelish chuckled softly. "A bold policy, sire, but perhaps not one that would keep the coffers filled." Robert ignored him and looked to Stannis. "What news from Dragonstone?" "The sea has been rough," Stannis said curtly, "but the ports are strong, the ship's ready. The crown's debts, however, grow heavier by the moon." "I tire of hearing of debts," Robert growled. "We are not beggars." "No," Stannis replied coolly. "Only borrowers." The words hung in the air. Robert glared at his brother but said nothing. The truth, he knew, was a blade that cut both ways. Jon Arryn's death had left the council unsteady. He felt it in every word spoken, every sideways glance. Something had changed since the old man's passing, something unseen yet dangerous. "Enough," Robert said at last, standing. "I did not ride 1,000 leagues to listen to coin counters squabble. Summon me when there is talk worth hearing." He turned and strode from the chamber, his cloak snapping behind him like thunder. That night, he feasted in the great hall. The tables groaned beneath platters of roasted boar and spiced fowl. Minstrels sang, their songs full of old victories and newer lies. Robert drank deep and laughed louder, but the joy would not come. Cersei sat beside him, her smile frozen, her hand resting lightly upon her cup. Jaime stood behind her, golden as an idol, his gaze drifting toward the queen with the faintest flicker of something unspoken. When Robert saw it, anger stirred in him, a deep, slow boil. He raised his cup and drank again, drowning it before it could find voice. "Sing louder," he bellowed to the musicians. "Let the walls shake with it." And so they played, though even the music could not fill the emptiness between them. Later, when the hall had emptied and the torches burned low, Robert wandered alone through the corridors of the keep. His footsteps echoed against the stone, and he thought of the man he had been when first he walked these halls, the conqueror, the rebel, the friend of Stark and Arryn. That man was gone, swallowed by years and wine. He came at last to the throne room. The great doors creaked open beneath his hand. The iron throne waited, its blades glinting in the torchlight like 1,000 watching eyes. Robert stood before it, silent. The throne seemed taller than he remembered, crueler. He had bled for it, killed for it, but it had never truly been his. He placed a hand upon the nearest blade. The metal was cold, sharp enough to draw blood. "You've had your fill of kings," he murmured, "and you'll have more before this game is done." He turned away before the ghosts could answer. At dawn, he met with Ser Barristan Selmy in the training yard. The old knight was sparring with 2 younger men, his white cloak billowing like snow. Even in his age, Barristan moved with the grace of a panther, his blade flashing faster than thought. Robert watched for a time before calling out, "You've still got the touch, old friend." Barristan saluted him with his sword. "Your grace honors me." "Bah, it's truth, not honor." Robert stepped closer, watching the light glint off the steel. "Tell me, Ser Barristan, do you ever tire of it? The killing? The service? The endless years?" The old knight sheathed his sword. "A man may tire of killing, but not of serving his king." Robert's smile was bitter. "And what of a king who no longer deserves service?" Barristan's eyes softened. "All kings fall short of what they once were, your grace. It is not the crown that makes the man, but the man who must learn to bear the crown." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Robert nodded slowly. "You're a good man, Selmy, better than I deserve." He turned away, the morning sun glinting off his armor. "Ready my horses," he said. "Tomorrow we hunt." Word of the hunt spread quickly. The court prepared with delight, eager to trade the heat of the city for the freedom of the woods. Robert's spirit seemed to lift with the promise of it. He laughed, he drank, he jested as though the years had fallen away. Yet beneath the laughter, the storm remained. That night, before he retired, he stood upon the balcony of his chambers, the city sprawling below like a nest of embers. The air smelled of rain, and thunder rolled faintly beyond the horizon. He thought of the hunt to come, of the deep woods and the wild boar, of the freedom he had once found there. And yet, deep in his chest, something cold and heavy stirred, a sense that the storm he carried would soon break for the last time. "Let it come," he whispered to the night. "I was born in a storm. I will die in one." Lightning flashed far off over the sea, bright and brief, and for an instant the city lay bathed in silver light. Then darkness claimed it again. The morning dawned heavy with the scent of rain and the call of horns. The royal hunt had begun. The king's banners streamed in the wind as riders mounted their horses in the courtyard of the Red Keep. The air was sharp, carrying the cries of hounds and the clatter of hooves upon stone. Robert Baratheon stood upon the steps, his cloak of black and gold thrown back, his face lit with a fierce, boyish grin that had not graced him in years. For this one day, at least, the weight of the crown seemed to have lifted. He looked less a weary monarch, and more the man he had been in youth, the storm lord of the rebellion, the thunder of the trident. "Ready the hounds," he bellowed, his voice booming through the courtyard. "Let us see if the gods still favor the hunter over the hunted." Cersei stood above upon the balcony, her face pale against the carved stone. She watched in silence as her husband mounted his great black destrier. Her hand rested lightly upon the rail, her fingers white. When Robert looked up at her, she smiled, a queen's smile, thin and practiced. He did not return it. Sir Barristan Selmy rode beside him, calm and vigilant, his white cloak bright in the morning mist. "Your Grace," he said quietly, "the woods may be treacherous this season. The rains have been heavy." Robert laughed. "A little mud never stopped me, Barristan. I was born in a storm, remember?" The gates opened with a groan of iron, and the party rode forth, knights, huntsmen, squires, and servants, down from the Red Keep and into the wild lands beyond the city walls. Behind them, the capital's clamor faded, until only the cries of crows and the rustle of the wind through leaves remained. By midday, they had reached the Kingswood, that vast green realm of oak and elm that stretched toward the sea. Shafts of sunlight pierced the canopy, painting the ground in gold and shadow. The air was cool and damp, rich with the smell of earth. The hounds ranged ahead, their voices rising in eager chorus. Robert rode at their front, his great frame swaying easily in the saddle. He laughed aloud when the first deer burst from the undergrowth, fleet and golden in the light. But no one loosed a shaft. This day was for the boar, the king of the forest, the hunt Robert favored above all others. They rode deep into the wood, past moss-hung trees and fallen logs, the silence broken only by the calls of the huntsmen and the baying of the hounds. The king drank from his skin of strong wine as they went, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Ah, gods," he said, his voice carrying through the trees. "This is life, Barristan. No council, no whispers, no damned thrones, only the hunt and the wind in my face." The old knight smiled faintly. "If only all wars were so easily fought, Your Grace." Robert chuckled. "If wars were won with wine and laughter, I'd have conquered the world by now." The laughter faded with the passing of the hours. The shadows lengthened and the forest grew darker, quieter. The hounds caught scent at last, a deep, coarse grunt, the sound of a beast stirring in the thicket. "The boar!" cried the master of hounds. Robert's eyes gleamed. At last! He spurred his horse forward, crashing through the brush with reckless joy. The others followed, shouting, horns blaring. Then the world erupted in sound and fury. The boar burst from the undergrowth, a monstrous thing, black and thick-shouldered, its tusks long as daggers. It charged through the hounds, scattering them like leaves. Men shouted, horses reared. Robert leapt from his saddle, drawing his hunting spear in one smooth motion. His boots sank into the mud as he faced the beast. "Come on then," he roared. "Let's see whose blood runs stronger." The boar lowered its head and came at him. The spear struck true, but not deep enough. The beast's charge threw Robert backward, the shaft snapping in his hands. Pain flared through him, sharp and searing. The tusk had torn deep into his thigh. He fell to one knee, blood soaking through his breeches, his vision blurring. The boar wheeled for another attack, its eyes red and wild. Before it could strike again, a dozen spears drove into its flank. The beast shuddered, stumbled, and fell, its death cry echoing through the trees. Men rushed forward, shouting for the Meister, for bandages, for aid. Barristan was the first to reach him, his white cloak darkening with blood as he knelt. "Your Grace," he said urgently, "you must be still." Robert gritted his teeth, his face pale. "A scratch," he muttered. "I've had worse in battle." But his blood flowed fast, black in the fading light. They bore him back to camp upon a litter, his body swaying with the motion of the horses. The sun had dipped below the treetops by the time they reached the tents. The air was thick with the smell of pine and blood. The royal maester bent over him at once, cutting away the torn fabric and pressing linen to the wound. Robert swore as the cloth met flesh. "Hold still, your Grace," the maester pleaded. "Hold still? Gods, I could drink a barrel of wine and feel less pain than your poking." He tried to laugh, but the sound came weak. Barristan stood nearby, his face grave. "You must rest, sire. The wound runs deep." Robert's gaze fixed on him, clear for a moment amid the haze. "Tell no one of this yet. I'll not have the realm thinking its king bested by a pig." The old knight bowed his head. "As you command." Night fell over the Kingswood. The fires burned low, their smoke curling toward the stars. Robert lay upon his cot within the royal tent, pale and sweating, the bandages already soaked through. The pain throbbed with every beat of his heart, yet his mind wandered far from it. He thought of Storm's End, of the sea breaking upon the cliffs. He thought of Ned, of the long road north and the laughter they had shared. And he thought of Lyanna, always Lyanna, the promise that had begun all his wars and ended all his peace. When Barristan entered, Robert's eyes were half closed, but he stirred at the sound. "The boar?" he asked. "Dead, your Grace." Robert's mouth twisted into a smile. "Good, then I've not lost completely." The knight bowed his head. "Rest, my king." Robert's gaze drifted toward the tent's open flap, where the night wind stirred. Beyond it, he could see the faint shimmer of stars through the branches. "A storm's coming," he murmured. Barristan looked out as well. "Aye, your Grace, but it will pass." Robert closed his eyes. "No storm ever truly passes, old friend. It only waits." And as the night deepened, the wind rose in the trees, whispering through the dark like a voice long lost to time. The storm that swept through the Kingswood that night was fierce and unrelenting. Rain lashed the canvas of the royal tents, and the thunder rolled like a war drum among the trees. The torches guttered and hissed, and the air smelled of blood and wet earth. Inside the king's pavilion, the world had narrowed to a single point. The low bed where Robert Baratheon, king of the Seven Kingdoms, lay pale and sweating, his life running slow as a dying tide. The maester worked by candlelight, his hands trembling as he wrung bloodied cloths. The wound in the king's thigh had blackened at its edges, and the scent of rot hung faintly in the air. Each time the maester touched the wound, Robert's body tensed, his great frame shuddering with pain. "Enough," Robert muttered. His voice was hoarse, a whisper buried beneath the storm's roar. "I said enough. If the gods mean to take me, they'll not need your help doing it." "Your grace," the master pleaded, "you must let me draw the corruption out. The boar's tusk, the boar is dead," Robert rasped, forcing his eyes open. "And soon enough I'll follow it. Gods, but I'd give half my realm for a drink." Sir Barristan Selmy stepped forward from the shadows, his armor gleaming dully in the candlelight. "Wine will do you no good now, sire." Robert laughed, though it came as a harsh cough. "Since when has wine ever done me good? It's done me company enough, though." Barristan knelt beside the bed, his weathered face grave. "A rider is on his way to the capital, your grace. The queen will be told, and Lord Stark—" "Stark," Robert interrupted, closing his eyes again. "Aye, Ned will come. He always comes when the world is falling apart." The rain drummed harder against the tent. For a long while, neither man spoke. By dawn the storm had passed, but the woods lay drowned in mist and silence. The camp stirred slowly, men moving like shadows among the trees. Crows gathered in black knots upon the branches, their cries sharp and hungry. Robert awoke to find his maester dozing beside him, his hands stained crimson to the wrists. The king's throat was dry as sand. "Wine," he croaked. "Bring me wine, or I'll rise and find it myself." Barristan, ever watchful, fetched a skin and poured a cup. Robert drank deep, grimacing as it burned down his throat. "Ah," he said softly, "that's better. I'll die with the taste of grapes on my tongue, if nothing else." "You will not die," Barristan said. Robert gave a faint smile. "You're a terrible liar, Selmy. A fine knight, but a poor comforter." He gestured weakly toward the tent flap. "Has the sun risen?" "It has, your grace." "Then open the flap. Let me see it. I'd not spend my last hours staring at bloody canvas." The knight obeyed, and pale gold light spilled into the tent. The forest beyond glistened with dew, every leaf and blade of grass shining like glass. For a moment, Robert's face softened. "I remember mornings like this," he said. "At Storm's End, my brothers and I would race to the cliffs to see who could leap the farthest into the waves. Gods, how the sea used to roar." He chuckled weakly. "I always won, of course. Stannis was too stiff, and Renly too afraid of his fine clothes getting wet." His voice trailed off, and the silence that followed was heavy with memory. When the riders from King's Landing arrived, the sun was high. Cersei Lannister swept into the camp like a queen of marble, her beauty undiminished, her eyes as cold as a blade. Behind her came her twin, Jaime, and a score of gold cloaks. Robert stirred at the sound of their entrance. "So the lions come at last," he muttered. Cersei approached the bed, her gown of green velvet whispering against the floor. "My husband," she said softly. "They told me you were gravely wounded." Robert's laugh was bitter. "Gravely enough. You can put aside your prayers for my recovery, woman. The gods have chosen their end for me." "You must not speak so," she said, her face an unreadable mask. "Why not? I've never been one to whisper." His eyes flicked to Jaime. "And you, Kingslayer, still guarding the queen so faithfully, are you?" Jaime's smile did not reach his eyes. "Always, your grace." Robert grunted. Aye, that's what I thought. Cersei turned to the Maester. Leave us. Barristan hesitated, but Robert waved him off. Go on, Sir Barristan. I've no secrets left worth guarding. When they were alone, Cersei knelt beside the bed. For a moment, she seemed to study his face as if seeing it anew. You were handsome once, she said quietly, before the wine and the wars took you. Robert managed a weak grin. And you were kind once, before the crown turned your heart to stone. Her lips curved faintly. Perhaps we were both fools. Fools indeed, he said. I thought to make a queen of you. You thought to make a king of me. We both failed. Their eyes met. Two strangers bound by a lifetime of silence. At last, Cersei rose. Rest, my lord. I will send prayers to the Sept. Save your prayers, Robert said. Pray for the realm instead. It will need your cunning more than my strength. She turned without reply, and her green cloak vanished beyond the tent flap. That night, Robert's fever worsened. His breaths came shallow, his strength fading with the moon. Barristan sat beside him, silent, while the Maester whispered desperate prayers to gods long deaf to mortal pleas. In his delirium, Robert spoke to ghosts. He called out for Ned, for Jon Arryn, for the brothers of his youth. At times he laughed, at others he cursed the heavens. When at last Eddard Stark arrived, 2 days later, the king was barely conscious. The Northern Lord knelt beside the bed, taking Robert's great hand in his own. I came as fast as I could, Ned said softly. Robert's eyes opened, clouded with pain but bright with recognition. Ned, you came. Always. Robert smiled faintly. I've done you wrong, old friend. Too much wrong to count, but you were the truest of us all. Ned shook his head. Rest. We'll speak later. There may be no later, Robert said. He struggled to sit, his breath rasping. Listen to me, Ned. You'll be hand still. The realm will need you when I'm gone. Guard my children. Keep them safe. I will, Ned said. Robert's gaze softened. Tell my brothers. Tell Stannis he was right, damn him. He always is. And Renly. Tell him to grow up. He chuckled, then winced. And tell the gods to have a cup of wine waiting. I'll not meet them sober. Ned squeezed his hand. You'll see them soon enough. Robert's eyes closed. Aye, too soon. The candle beside the bed flickered low. Outside, the wind rose again, whispering through the trees. Lyanna, he murmured, I promised you. The words faded into silence, and as dawn crept over the Kingswood, the last of the storm broke, and Robert Baratheon, first of his name, passed from the world he had conquered, but never truly ruled. The stag of the storm was dead, and with him ended the age he had made. The dawn that followed Robert Baratheon's death was pale and mournful. A thin mist clung to the trunks of the Kingswood, veiling the world in quiet sorrow. No songs were sung that morning. The campfires burned low and cold, their smoke rising in ghostly ribbons toward the sky. The men moved slowly, speaking little, for all knew the storm had passed and left only silence in its wake. The king lay upon a bier within his tent, clad in the armor he had once worn at the Trident, the rubies of his breastplate dull in the gray light. His face, once red with wine and laughter, seemed strangely peaceful now, as though he had merely fallen into some deep sleep. Yet those who had known him best saw something missing. The fire, the wild strength that had once made him seem larger than life. Eddard Stark stood beside him, his head bowed. He had watched men die before, in war and in peace, but this death weighed heavier than most. Robert had been more than a king. He had been a brother of the soul, bound by oaths, forged in the crucible of rebellion. Now he was gone, and the realm would feel the loss as keenly as a sword to the heart. Beside Ned stood Ser Barristan Selmy, grave and still. The old knight's eyes shone with quiet grief. "He was a great man," Barristan said softly, his voice roughened by years and sorrow. "Flawed, yes, but greatness seldom comes without flaws." Ned nodded. "He fought for love once. The world has forgotten that." "The world forgets much," Barristan replied. Outside the tent, the first horns sounded, the call to march. The king's body would be borne back to King's Landing beneath the banners of the stag, his final journey along the same road he had once taken as a conqueror. The procession began at sunrise. Knights in black and gold rode at the front, their banners drooping in the damp air. Behind them came the bier, drawn by 6 black horses. The wind tugged at the edges of the shroud, but the crown upon the dead king's brow did not stir. The roads through the wood were thick with mud. Wheels sank deep, hooves splashed, and the sound of rain mingled with the muffled tramp of boots. Above them, crows followed, their cries echoing through the trees. Ned rode beside the bier, silent, his cloak drawn close against the chill. In his heart, a storm brewed. He thought of the promise Robert had whispered through failing breaths, "Guard my children, keep them safe." And he wondered what truth lay hidden behind those words. When they halted at midday, the sky was still gray and low. Men dismounted, tending to the horses and kindling fires to drive off the cold. Ned stood apart, gazing into the forest. Lord Renly approached him then, his cloak of green velvet bright against the gloom. His face, so like Robert's in youth, was pale with anger. "He should never have gone," Renly said bitterly. "The boar, the wine, the folly of it all. He was a king, not a hunter." Ned turned to him. He was both, and perhaps that was the truest thing about him. Renly's mouth twisted. "You'll return to the capital with us?" "I must," Ned said. "There is much unfinished." Renly hesitated, then spoke low. "Then you should know. The queen gathers her allies already. There are whispers that she will place her son upon the throne before the body is cold." Ned's eyes hardened. "The law is clear. Stannis is next in line." Renly shook his head. "The law means little when crowns are forged by daggers. Be careful, Lord Stark. The lions smell weakness." Before Ned could reply, thunder rumbled far off, rolling through the forest like the echo of the past. They reached the gates of King's Landing at dusk 3 days later. The city awaited them draped in black and gold banners, its streets lined with weeping crowds. Bells tolled from every sept, and the air was thick with the smell of smoke and rain. The bier passed beneath the Red Keep's archway in solemn procession. The courtiers gathered within the courtyard, their faces carefully schooled into grief. Cersei stood upon the steps to receive them, her gown the color of mourning, her beauty terrible in its stillness. At her side stood her son, Prince Joffrey, golden-haired, his chin lifted high. When the guards laid the bier before her, Cersei's face did not change. She touched the edge of the shroud with pale fingers, then turned to her son. "Your father was a great man," she said, her voice ringing clear across the court. "You will honor him by ruling as he did, with strength." A murmur rippled through the gathered lords. Ned heard the words, but not the truth beneath them. He saw only the tilt of her chin, the cold glint in her eyes. The realm had lost its stag, and the lioness now ruled the den. That night, torches flared across the city as the people mourned. In the great hall, the king's body was laid out beneath the iron throne, surrounded by candles, The hall smelled of wax and roses, and the hush was broken only by the whisper of flames. Ned stood there long after the others had gone. The iron throne loomed above him, its twisted blades glinting in the candlelight. It seemed to watch him, waiting. "You won your crown upon a river of blood," he murmured, looking down at Robert's still form. "And now it drowns us all." Far from the hall, Cersei Lannister stood upon her balcony overlooking the city. The night was warm, the air thick with the scent of rain and dust. Jaime stood beside her, his armor unbuckled, his golden hair tousled by the wind. "It's done," he said softly. "The kingdom mourns, the court whispers, and the vultures circle." Cersei's lips curved faintly. "Let them circle. They will find only bones if they come too close." "And the hand?" She turned, her eyes gleaming in the torchlight. "Lord Stark thinks himself righteous, but righteousness is a brittle shield. We shall see how well it holds." Jaime smiled, half weary, half admiring. "You play the game well, sister." "I learned from lions," she replied. Below them, the city murmured like a restless sea. The torches along the walls burned low, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again. When the dawn broke, gray and cold, the bells tolled once more. Robert Baratheon's body was carried into the sept, where 7 candles burned for 7 gods. The realm's lords knelt in silence, each lost in thought of what had been and what was yet to come. As the flames flickered over the king's still face, it seemed for an instant that the shadow of a crown passed across the walls, fleeting, uncertain, like the echo of a storm long spent. And in that moment, those who watched felt what they could not name: the turning of an age. The rebellion's fire had burned itself to ash, and from that ash new wars would rise. The stag of the storm had fallen, but his echoes lingered still, rumbling faintly through the stones of the realm he had forged, whispering to those who would follow that kingship, "Like the wind, cannot be tamed." The city of King's Landing awoke beneath a shroud of mourning. The bells of the great sept tolled from dawn till dusk, their solemn peal echoing over rooftops slick with the remnants of rain. The black banners of House Baratheon hung from the Red Keep's towers, drooping in the wind like weary wings. Yet even as the kingdom bowed its head, the wheels of ambition began to turn anew. The late king's body lay within the sept of Baelor, wrapped in cloth of gold, his hands folded upon his breast. Candles flickered on every side, casting wavering halos across the pale marble floor. The scent of incense filled the air, mingling with the faint salt of tears and the heavy perfume of roses brought by the queen. Robert Baratheon, breaker of kings and conqueror of thrones, lay still as stone. His mighty hands that had once shattered armor and raised cups in victory were now motionless. His face, pale and drawn, seemed carved from the same marble that surrounded him. The realm he had built trembled upon the edge of his grave. Eddard Stark stood vigil through the night beside the bier. The candlelight played upon his features, drawing the years upon them deeper. He remembered a younger Robert, broad of shoulder, loud of laughter, as unstoppable as the storms that bore his name. That man was gone, and what remained was a kingdom built upon his ashes. Footsteps echoed through the sept. Cersei Lannister entered, her gown trailing dark silk across the stone. Her beauty was still fierce, her composure flawless, but her eyes were cold as the sea in winter. "You should rest, Lord Stark," she said softly. "The dead ask nothing more of us." Ned did not look up. "The dead ask truth, Your Grace, and truth seldom rests." She approached the bier, her gaze fixed upon the still face of her husband. "He was a good king," she said too smoothly. "The realm will not see his like again." "Aye," Ned said, his voice hard. "I pray it will not." Her eyes flicked toward him, sharp and bright. "You speak boldly for a man so far from his own walls." "I speak plainly," he replied. "Plain words have ever been the way of my house." She smiled thinly. "And yet plain words can be perilous in the game of crowns." They held one another's gaze for a long moment, the silence between them louder than any bell. Then Cersei turned away, her gown whispering across the floor like a serpent's scales. When she was gone, Ned exhaled slowly. He felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him. The gods, perhaps, or something darker. The flickering candles made the shadows move, and for an instant he thought he saw the faintest trace of a crown upon the dead man's brow gleam red as blood. The funeral procession began at sunrise. The streets were thick with mourners, their faces streaked with tears and ash. Nobles in velvet and small folk in rags alike lined the way, for even those who had cursed Robert in life came now to honor him in death. The city roared with the tolling of bells, the thunder of hooves, the slow drumbeat of the king's passing. At the head of the column rode Eddard Stark, his gray cloak heavy with dew. Behind him came the coffin, draped in black and gold, borne upon a wagon of polished oak. 6 white horses drew it through the streets. The sound of their hooves struck like a heartbeat against the cobblestones. High above, the Septons sang in mourning, the air filled with their voices, weaving prayers into the morning sky. The words rose and fell, ancient and sorrowful. From storm and fire, from wrath and woe, return now to the gods who made thee so. The people wept. Some called his name, others whispered prayers to the Seven, asking mercy for the king who had loved wine and war more than peace or piety. At last, the procession reached the great hall of the Red Keep. There, beneath the looming shadow of the Iron Throne, Robert Baratheon was laid for the last time. The hall was silent, but for the echo of the Septons' chant. The throne itself, forged of blades and blood, gleamed cruelly in the dim light. Ned looked upon it and felt a chill creep through his bones. It seemed to him that the throne waited, hungry still. When the Septon's voice faded, Cersei stepped forward. Her son, Joffrey, walked beside her, pale and golden. The boy's eyes were bright, not with grief, but something colder. Ambition gleamed there, sharp as steel. "My lords," the queen said, her voice smooth as silk, "my husband, your king, is gone. The gods have taken him, and now they give us his heir." She turned, resting her hand upon the boy's shoulder. "Behold, King Joffrey Baratheon, first of his name." A murmur rippled through the gathered lords. Some bent the knee at once, their faces eager or fearful. Others hesitated. Ned Stark did not move. His gaze fell upon the boy's face, the hair golden as the Lannisters, not dark as the Baratheons. In that instant, the pieces fell into place, and dread settled cold in his heart. Cersei's eyes met his. She knew, and she smiled. That night, thunder rolled again over the city, though no rain followed. Ned sat alone in his chambers, the parchment bearing Robert's final decree spread before him. The dying king's hand had trembled when he'd written it, naming Eddard protector of the realm until the true heir came of age. But now, in the queen's hands, that truth was a weapon waiting to be turned. He poured himself a cup of wine and stared into its dark depths. "What would you have done, Robert?" he murmured. "Would you have faced this storm or drowned in it?" The answer, of course, was silence. When dawn came, Eddard Stark rose and donned his cloak. The air was cool, the city still. He walked once more to the sept, where the last of the candles burned low around the bier. For a long time he stood in quiet thought. "You were my brother," he said softly. "I will do what I must, for you, and for the realm you left behind. But gods help us all, for I fear the storm you began has only just begun to break." He bowed his head, then turned and walked into the light of morning. Behind him, the last candle flickered out. And so, though the king was dead, his shadow remained, stretching long and dark across the realm, a storm that would not fade, a fire that would not die. The storm that had begun with Robert Baratheon's death did not break all at once. It crept through the Red Keep like a rising tide, silent at first, then swift and deadly. The air within the castle had grown thick with whispers, of letters sealed and unsealed, of lords meeting behind locked doors, of blades being sharpened in the dark. The banners of mourning still hung from the towers, but already the color was leaching from them, the black fading to gray, the gold to rust. The scent of incense from the funeral rites lingered in every hall, mingling with the stench of fear. Eddard Stark felt it in every breath he drew. He moved through the corridors as a man might walk through the ruins of a battlefield, wary, alert, haunted. The courtiers who had once bowed to him now lowered their eyes or turned away altogether. He had returned to the capital as the king's hand, yet found himself a stranger among snakes. Each dawn he rose early to look eastward from his chamber window, toward the sea where light broke upon the black water. There, for a heartbeat, the city seemed at peace, but the moment never lasted. The sound of clashing voices would rise from the lower halls, the mutter of plots and the rustle of hidden messages carried through the air like smoke. The Queen's presence grew heavier each day. Cersei Lannister ruled now in all but name, her beauty sharpened by the hunger for power. She held court beside her son, who sat the Iron Throne like a gilded ghost of his father. Joffrey's crown was too large for his brow, and his smile too cruel for his years. When Eddard stood before the throne to speak the words of Robert's final decree, the Queen was waiting. "Lord Stark," she said, her voice cool as winter rain, "you come before us bearing the words of a dying man, but the realm has a living king." Ned's gaze did not waver. "Robert Baratheon named me protector of the realm until his son came of age." Her eyes glinted like polished emeralds. "And here he sits, of age enough to wear his father's crown." The boy looked down at them both, a faint smirk curling his lips. "Do you question my right to rule, Lord Stark?" There was a silence so deep that even the torches seemed to still their crackle. "I question nothing," Ned said at last. "I serve the realm, and I will do my duty as the king commanded." Cersei rose from her seat beside the throne, the long train of her gown whispering across the stone. "Then you serve me," she said. "No," Ned replied softly. "I serve the realm, and the realm is not yours to keep." The words struck like a hammer upon the court. Gasps rippled through the gathered lords. Jaime Lannister's hand dropped idly to the hilt of his sword, though his smile never faltered. Cersei's face remained composed, but her voice carried an edge of steel. "You speak treason, Lord Stark. I speak truth. And truth," she said, "is often treason to those who fear it." She turned to the boy upon the throne. "Your Grace, the hand forgets his place." Joffrey's fingers curled upon the arm of his chair. Then perhaps he should be reminded. At the gesture of his hand, the gold cloaks moved, 50 men in armor bearing the Lion of Lannister upon their cloaks. Ned's own guards stepped forward, steel singing from scabbards, but the hall was already lost. Swords flashed, shouts rose, and chaos swept the throne room like wildfire. Ned's men fought bravely, but they were few and taken by surprise. When the clash ended, the marble floor was slick with blood. Ned himself stood weaponless, surrounded by gold cloaks. Jaime's sword gleamed before him, but it was Cersei's voice that filled the silence. "Take him," she said. They brought him to the black cells beneath the Red Keep, where the walls sweated and the air stank of mold. The torchlight flickered weakly upon the damp stones as he was thrown inside. The door slammed shut, and the sound echoed through the darkness like the closing of a tomb. For a long time, he sat in silence, his thoughts heavy with the weight of all that had come before. He saw Robert's face in his mind, the laughter, the rage, the dreams they had shared. "A storm is coming," Robert had said, "and it will not pass." Ned understood now. The rebellion that had crowned the stag had only scattered the storm, not ended it. The same winds that had carried them to victory would now tear the realm apart. He thought of his daughters, of the long road back to Winterfell that now seemed impossibly far. He thought of honor, that frail and shining thing he had carried all his life like a sword. In this place, it seemed a poor weapon. Above, the city roared. The bells tolled again, but this time not for mourning, for celebration. The boy king had been crowned in the great hall, his mother at his side. The cheers reached even the dungeons, dull and distant, as if the stones themselves mocked him. Ned closed his eyes and whispered a prayer to the old gods, though they were far from this place. "Let the North remember," he said. "Let honor still mean something in this world." The torch outside his cell guttered and died. Darkness closed around him. In the days that followed, the city changed. The lion's banners replaced the stags upon the Red Keep's towers, and the laughter of the small folk took on an edge of fear. Men who had called Robert friend now bent the knee to his widow's son, eager to keep their heads. Yet beyond the walls, the realm stirred. In the Stormlands, men whispered of vengeance. In Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon gathered his fleet beneath banners of red and gold, grim and silent. In the Vale and the North, ravens flew by night, bearing messages sealed in wax and blood. The storm that Robert Baratheon had been born into now spread across the Seven Kingdoms. It howled through the mountains, rattled the gates of Winterfell, and churned the black waters of Shipbreaker Bay. And through it all, his memory lingered, half legend, half ghost. The songs began to rise again, sung in taverns and on the road. Songs of the great rebel, the hammer of the trident, the king who loved and lost and drank too deep of life. They did not sing of his crown, nor of his court. They sang of the man who had fought dragons with a laugh on his lips and a storm in his heart. For in the end, Robert Baratheon had been what the gods had made him, a rebel born of common blood, a tempest that could never be tamed. And though his throne was cold and his realm divided, the wind that bore his name would not die. It swept over the land still, wild, defiant, eternal. The storm of the stag endured,